All right, so we've been talking about the versatility of carbon as it combines with other elements to form organic compounds. And in this screencast, we're going to talk about functional groups, which are essential for biological activity. So a little bit of carbon in action. Here we go. All right, so there are a certain number of chemical groups, and these are our functional groups, that are essential to, as I just said, biological activity, to the functioning of biological molecules. So the properties of organic molecules depend on the carbon skeleton and the molecular components attached to it, and these are these functional groups. Characteristics of groups can replace the hydrocarbons attached to skeletons to the organic molecules, so that the skeleton kind of loses its functionality when it's replaced or when these functional groups are added on. All right, here we go with our functional groups. Are components of organic molecules that are involved in chemical reactions, okay? Biological activity. These are the reactive parts of your compounds. And how many functional groups and where they are placed give each molecule its own individual characteristics. And as we go on throughout the course of the year, and we talk about macromolecules and enzymes and all kinds of fun things, you'll start to see patterns of these functional groups, and you'll learn what each functional group does to a particular molecule. For example, here are two molecules we're probably both familiar with, testosterone and estradiol, which is estrogen. And you can see that there is part of the molecule, this part here, and this part here, is identical, okay? And just the addition of a couple of different functional groups. Here's functional group. When you put, this is called a hydroxyl group there, you get estrogen, okay? And if you don't put that hydroxyl group and instead you place a carbonyl group there, and this is a methyl group, you get testosterone. So again, the two sex hormones, one gives you male secondary sex characteristics, the other one gives you female secondary sex characteristics. And they're basically the same thing, except for some very tiny differences. But that is the impact that these functional groups can have on a protein or on any molecule. This actually isn't a protein. It's a lipid. But they have a very significant impact. So let's learn about them. So there are 7 functional groups that are most important in biochemistry. And these are they. And we're going to go through each one kind of quickly. You guys don't need to totally memorize all this stuff. But when I'm talking about them in class, or if I say, look at this molecule, what kind of functional groups does it have? What does that mean? You should be able to explain that part. Okay, so we're going to go through these guys, and let's get started. So the first one is a hydroxyl group. It is a hydrogen and an oxygen. Okay, hydroxyl groups tend to specify an alcohol. They can be put on other things other than alcohols, but if you just see hydroxyl groups, you probably have an alcohol. All right, this is ethyl alcohol, which is the alcohol that we use to create drinking alcohol. And this group is polar, and we should always be thinking about polar, nonpolar, hydrophobic, hydrophilic. These are the words. So when you look at a compound, you should be able to tell instantly whether or not it's going to dissolve in water. And this is going to dissolve in water because of the electronegativity of the oxygen atom. All right, so that's our hydroxyl. Next is our carbonyl, again, another oxygen. So it is also going to be polar and will dissolve in water, so it'll be hydrophilic. And carbonyl groups, you have your aldehydes and your ketones, and you literally really don't need to know the difference between here. But in case you're curious, a ketone has the carbonyl group internal to the chain, the carbon chain, and an aldehyde has the carbonyl group at the end of the carbon chain. That's really the only difference. So those are our carbonyls. Here's our carboxyl. Again, lots of oxygen, so polar as all get out. Definitely hydrophilic. Carboxyl groups form acids, carboxylic acid, when they are in organic molecules. And they are usually written in the ionized form. So you'll see them kind of abbreviated sometimes like this. So that would be the non-ionized, and the ionized would be written like that. So these are the same thing. So this is the same thing as this. Okay. And our carboxyl groups, we're going to see these a lot when we start talking about proteins. They team up with our amino group. And again, nitrogen is an electronegative element, so this is also going to be polar. You'll see right here we have our carboxyl group that we just talked about. Here's our amino group. And this is glycine, and it's an amino acid. Okay, so the amino part is there, the acid part is there. Ta-da! Okay, glycine can also be ionized. It actually gains or takes on the proton that's usually released by the carboxyl group, and it can be written in this form as well. What's next? What is next? Oh, that is not what I meant to do. Oh, geez. Oh, technical difficulties. Ah! All right, we're just going to flip up here. Sulfhydryl. All right, sulfhydryl groups really have to do with higher order protein structure. And protein structure is going to be your best friend very soon. Okay, so sulfhydryl groups, you have a sulfur molecule and a hydrogen. These are your thiols. You really don't care about that. But they, so again, cysteine here is another amino acid. There's my amino group. There's my carboxylic acid group. Okay. And there's my sulfhydryl group. And so when a protein is folding up into the proper structure, that sulfhydryl group is going to play a big role in the higher order structure. Next, phosphate. Again, phosphate, look at all this. Oxygen, 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 phosphorus. Polar like nobody's business. I'm going to write it in all caps because it's so polar. Okay, so we'll definitely be hydrophilic, and we'll make anything that it's bound to extremely polar. Okay. Also, because it's bringing all of these oxygen, it's going to contribute to a negative charge on the molecule. So anything that has lots of phosphate is going to be negatively charged. Okay. And this will be important later on. File that away. Okay. All right. And also molecules that contain a lot of phosphate groups react very strongly with water and release energy. And we're going to see why this is important in just a minute. Okay, so then there's glycerol phosphate. And see how we've combined here? There's my hydroxyl groups. Here's my phosphate. So glycerol is the alcohol part, and phosphate refers to the phosphate group. So this is glycerol phosphate. This is the last one, methyl group. Methyl groups, if you look, carbon, hydrogen, 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 nothing very electronegative. So these guys are non-polar. Okay, so they tend to make a compound hydrophobic or a little less dissolved in water. Okay. Methyl groups tend to have functional in turning molecules on and off. So do phosphate groups. They can be bound to DNA and affect the expression of genes. And as we saw with a few slides ago with the estrogen and testosterone, okay, arrangements of the methyl group on the sex hormones affects their shape and function. Okay, so that's it for our functional groups. And I'm just talk a little bit about our phosphate group again. And you may have heard of adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, which is our energy currency in biological systems. So adenosine triphosphate has how many phosphates do you think it has? Anyone? Anyone? Three phosphate groups. And I said just adding even one gives it a crazy amount of charge, a crazy amount of activity. And ATP has 3, which is why it is our primary energy source. Okay. So a molecule called adenosine, and adenosine is a nucleic acid. And then 3 phosphate groups. And we'll see a picture of it right here. There it is. So adenosine, this is a nucleic acid. And then we've got our 3 phosphates. And this makes this compound very polar and very high energy. And we'll talk about that again very soon, but it's going to be your buddy. All right, so a quick review for the chemical elements of life. So this is our biochemistry. Carbon is the guy. He's the man. Carbon and the versatility of carbon makes all the diversity of organic molecules possible. See, diversity is always important. And variation at the molecular level lies at the foundation of all biological diversity. So we all look different, act different, organisms, plants, animals, protists, fungi, everything, all has to do with carbon and these functional groups. Everything boils down to that. So there you go. All right, I think that's it. The end. Bye-bye, carbon.